I spend most of my time, historically I spend most of my time in the enterprise IT space. And the enterprise IT space has been a little quiet in the past decade, and I don't think it's going to stay quiet. And I want to talk about where it's going, and in particular how it will relate to some of the policy issues that the this Innovation Summit is dealing with around, the creation of jobs, creation of work, the whole American competitive advantage footprint in a changing world. And so the agenda is going to start with something that I think I know something about, which is the future of enterprise IT. And then I'm going to do some speculating about the future of work, which is speculation. But I'm Irish, and we're good at speculation. That's one of our strongest strengths. So this is kind of where it's going to head. We'll talk a little bit about something called systems of record, meet systems of engagement, and this thing that some people are calling the consumerization of enterprise IT. I think it's a very big deal. And I want to tell you why I think it's a big deal. But I also want to talk about how it's going to reshape, and how it is reshaping already, the future of work, and how the implications of that for where you invest in talent, what does it mean to create employment in the United States in this century, because I don't think it means the same thing it meant in the last century. And I think some of the challenges of public policy is that we have residual mental models about how do you create a strong society around job creation that are wrong. And I think we got to sort of adjust them in real time. So that's kind of where this thing is headed. Okay, enterprise IT, the current state, systems of record are largely complete. So systems of record are all the database systems that we spent, decade after decade after decade creating, first for mainframes, then for mini computers, then for client server, then for internet-enabled SaaS. And it started with financial systems, and then it went to HR systems, and then it went to order processing and inventory management, and then it went to customer relationship management and supply chain management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we did it, all the way across and all the way down. And by the end of the decade, we had pretty much spent about $1 trillion, maybe a little bit more. So there were data centers everywhere, and they were designed essentially to run transaction systems on behalf of large and then increasingly medium and then eventually small businesses. It was all about online transaction processing. The relational database was the center of the universe. You talked about data, you talked about information. That was where everything converged. And the network was only a transport mechanism to get data from one place to another place. That's sort of the world of that world. And business intelligence was intended to help you mine the data to try to understand what was going on. And then, if that weren't enough, we had Y2K come along, so we did it all one extra time, right? And that led to a sort of a collective, sort of feasting that was then followed by a prolonged belch called the tech bubble bursting. And when the tech bubble burst, we kind of dissipated all of that, and we kind of came back to the table. It was a new world. It was a new world because, in a very large sense, the systems of record were done. Now, they're never done. But it was like the interstate highway system, which was one of the great national initiatives of my grandparents and my parents' generation. It's done. I mean, we maintain the interstate highway system, but nobody's like, we're in the interstate highway system business. That's not where the focus of investment is, and hasn't been for decades. I would make the claim that that's where we are with systems of engagement. That's why it's consolidating. That's why you have SAP and Oracle as the two major players, because we're kind of done. And what this last decade has been in the enterprise, because there has been investment and there has been returns, it's been largely on economizing against that footprint. Virtualization, the whole VMware extended model has been dramatically impactful in this decade, but that's an optimization play to extract unused resources from the system. So enterprise IT, I would submit to you, for the last decade has largely been on hold, but meanwhile, consumer IT has been on fire, right? I mean, our industry does not lack for superlatives or superlative comparisons, but honest to God, this is as transformative as anything imaginable in human history. And I think it's fair to call it the digitization of all human culture. Not just books, not just movies, not just music, not just, personal communications with each other. We've digitized financial services, we're digitizing healthcare services, we're digitizing educational services, we're digitizing crime, we're digitizing warfare. I mean, it used to be you say, well, I have a digital life and an analog life, you don't. You now are leading a digitally mediated life, period. And you cannot negotiate life in this current century without digital mediation. So if you think about what happened, I mean, that was not true 15 years ago. So you say, well, what are the pillars of that change? And there are three of them. The first one was the internet and the web, and this unbelievable experience of access, where all of a sudden, literally anything can be answered via Google or this new thing, I think it's called Bing. Yeah. God bless. Okay. And even occasionally a Yahoo search thrown in on the side. Okay. But the point is, and this access isn't just for us. I mean, this access is touching the planet. This access is causing regimes to totter and potentially topple in the Middle East. And it's creating, waves of shock throughout every economy and every culture in the world. So it's huge, and it is deeply and inherently democratic in a way that is just highly disruptive to totalitarian regimes of any kind. Then we added broadband. What broadband does is it takes it from being a medium for the mind and makes it a medium for the heart and the soul. So what social networking is all about is not about information. It's about pictures, either moving or not, some of which you would like to endorse, some of which you would like not to endorse. But they're there, and they're there now forever. And the point is this has become an emotional medium, which means it can galvanize people. When you see pictures on the internet of the Japanese earthquake, or the nuclear thing, or the rise in Tiananmen Square or in Egypt or Libya, or all this stuff, it's deeply emotional, which means the planet is now resonating much faster than it could ever before. And then the third thing is it's mobile, which means it's omnipresent, as our friends at Galleon Trading are discovering right now. I mean, there is no privacy. I know we had a little thing about privacy. There isn't any privacy. It just isn't. It's not there. You can do whatever you want to do, but you can't control the guy with a cell phone pointing it at you, right? So it's a completely different world. It has been transformative. And in this world, you say, wow, I'm a powerful person in this world. I can order reservations. I can get hotels. I can get planes. I can find out anything. I can find out where my third grade, classmate, is today, that kind of stuff. It's just when I come to work, I can't figure out who's my best customer, right? So why am I so powerful as a consumer and so lame as an employee has become the lament of the decade. And if you're in IT, you know why. This is hard. This is really hard to do in an enterprise. But from a user's point of view, it's like, this is just brain dead. What's the matter with you people, right? So you have this situation, and this, by the way, always happens to IT. Right? I mean, it did with the PC, it did with everything, right? Can you imagine allowing people at work to go onto the web? Well, they might waste time, right? But people were saying that, 8 years ago? Yeah, it was illegal to go on the web, right? Nobody would ever do a credit card transaction over the web. Never happened, right? So we got there. So the question really is, why would it, and this is disruptive innovation in spades, right? So you say, okay, well, what would cause it to fold? Because just because it's new and it's cool doesn't mean that enterprise IT has to respond. They're very good at ignoring things for prolonged periods of time and explaining to you why you're wrong. And by the way, they're not stupid explanations, but they are tiresome. But you say, okay, what is going to actually drive this? And this is important from an investor point of view. Jeremy and I are talking at the table here because he and I, neither of us are general partners in an investment firm because we're both way too optimistic. Our view is as soon as something good shows up, everybody will love it, right? Well, they don't. So the question is, what will force people to make the move? So I've had the privilege in this last decade to go to this World Economic Forum thing in Davos about 7 or 8 times. And one of the good things about that is you kind of get a planetary view of the world economy. You're high in the mountains, you're drinking very nice wine, you get very philosophical, right? This is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, set in Davos, by the way. Okay, so that's what it's like. So you step back and say, what's going on? And the big thing, it started with outsourcing. And the internet enabled outsourcing about 20 years ago. And it was this way of just getting kind of low cost, lowering the costs of a very high cost footprint in the manufacturing industry and then in the customer services to India. And outsourcing, however, was shockingly successful. It was so successful that we now have China as the world's second largest economy, and India is not far behind. Now, for somebody raised in my generation, that was like the falling of the Berlin Wall. Those are two things that were fundamentally unimaginable in the generation that I was raised in. So globalization has been the most effective form of foreign aid in the history of the planet by far. God bless Mr. Marshall in Europe, but not even close, right? Transformed these economies and create major markets, all to the good. I mean, very tough for us, very good for them, right? The tough for us is not only are jobs going out, but very, very cheap goods are coming in. So now all of a sudden you have category after category after category that's getting commoditized. And you're playing in a developed economy, you don't have the low-cost advantage. How in the world, you have a margin model, and these folks are eating at your margin model and causing it to shrink. Well, one thing you learn if you've been in consulting for 20 years, as I have, and you consult the businesses, the one thing you must never change is your margin model. You can change anything else, including the CEO, with monotonous regularity. But you must not change your margin model because it's very, very hard to reconstruct the company around a new model. So if you're going to preserve the model and commoditization's happening, what do? And the answer is we have to differentiate. This is what all this stuff was about innovation. This is why there was a book about innovation, how great companies innovate at every stage of their growth. Because people are desperate I need to reignite the growth engine. I need to reignite the margin model so that I can stay in business in a developed economy, paying wages and having nice lunches in nice places like this. Okay, well, how do you differentiate, though? Because other guys are trying to do it, too. And what you end up doing is you say, you know what? We can't do everything anymore. We have to specialize. We have to figure out what's our core, what we're really good at. We're going to double down there, and we'll find ways to partner or otherwise economize on the other stuff. But the problem with economizing is you don't invest enough, and after a while you realize, you know what? It would be better to let another company do this for whom that work is core, because they will invest in the systems and in the training and in the people, which we won't. And then we can spend more of our time on the stuff that's core for us. So now that starts another round of outsourcing. So this is now becoming either a virtuous or a vicious circle, depending on how you're feeling today, right? And how optimistic or pessimistic you feel about this, but it is certainly Darwinian. This is now the selective pressure that is driving corporations in developed economies like ours to innovate. And IT systems are one of the few places where we still have a substantial advantage over anybody in a developing economy. So how would you apply IT systems and IT power to the problem of staying ahead in this rat race?